You're listening to Release Your Resistance with Bex Beltran, episode 45. Welcome to Release Your Resistance. This is Bex. The only reason why any of us don't have what we want in life is because of our own resistance. Right now, I'm learning how to recognize and release my resistance, and this podcast tells you how you can release your resistance so that you can live the exact life that you want. Let's get started. Last month, I came upon a journaling prompt while I was doing my beloved morning ritual. Weeks or maybe months before, I had been inspired by an article from Martha Beck called 20 Questions That Could Change Your Life. When I came across that article, I decided that some of those questions would make great writing prompts, and I wrote them in the margins of my journal. Then, as I encountered each question, I'd answer it according to however I was feeling that day. The very last prompt that I wrote towards the end of the notebook was, what questions should I be asking myself? When I finally arrived at that prompt, I saw it that morning and I remember thinking, I don't have any questions to ask myself. And I don't have enough space left in the rest of this journal to ask and answer a bunch of questions. And I also remember thinking it was getting late, and since I didn't have any questions to ask myself, maybe this was a good time to finish writing and start my day. I could save this prompt for later or just skip it completely. But since I am practicing noticing resistance in my own thoughts and actions, I recognized all those reasons I was giving myself were just resistance. And I thought, okay, let me think. What questions should I be asking myself? One came to mind immediately. Almost like a message from my inner voice. Am I in alignment? Oh, no wonder I was resistant to asking the question, since this is one of the most important questions, and I already knew, sadly, the answer was maybe not. This was going to be tough. The next question that came to mind was, am I taking care of myself? This question refers to a list of questions that I learned and adapted from another one of my favorite teachers, Jenny Blake, to ask whenever you feel off. There's a list of questions you can check in with yourself to identify why you're not feeling the way you want to feel. So by this point, I knew 2 questions I should be asking myself that I was resisting. Then, since I know my purpose in life is to be It Girl, the future me alter ego I created for myself, I wrote, am I being It Girl? Again, I realized lately, maybe not so much. The questions kept coming. Am I doing what I want to be doing? How do I feel in the moment? What am I currently resisting? And at that point, I realized that these were all really good questions and could become journaling prompts for the next blank journal that was waiting for me to crack open the next day. I also realized maybe this exercise of asking myself what questions should I be asking wasn't meant for me to ask and answer questions today in the remaining pages and the remaining minutes, but as a way to come up with really personal and interesting writing prompts for the coming days and weeks. My mind shifted. I was no longer resistant to this question. I no longer felt like I didn't have enough space and time. Now I was curious. Now I kind of wanted to dig around in my brain and explore my thoughts and answer the questions I had come up with so far. I was up to 6 questions by this point. And you know me, when I start a list, once it gets past a certain point, it's destined to become a list of 10. And the interesting and thought-provoking questions kept pouring out of me. What am I telling myself I don't want to do? Why? What is delighting me right now? What does my inner voice want to tell me? It was obviously already offering me so much with just this list of questions. How can I be unconditionally loving today? And finally, a bonus question and an old favorite standby that I love so much. What am I grateful for? This was an exciting exercise and list of questions for me. It was completely unexpected, and at the same time, I really couldn't wait to dive in and start answering. I didn't even skip a line, probably because I also wanted to save space so I'd have enough room to write. I immediately started answering the first question and kept going through the next 5 questions that morning, even though it meant I had to carve space around other notes that I had already made in the back pages of the journal. It worked. I drew arrows and made lines and boxes around what I wrote so that when I reread it in the future, I'll be able to follow the thread of what I was writing. It was a great morning of journaling and started my day off exactly right. And I kept thinking about it throughout the day. Later on, I did grab another notebook, my next journal, and starting with question number 7, I wrote the prompts in the margins for me to continue the exercise as I journal in the coming days. Thanks, Martha. That one question was the gift that keeps on giving, the prompt that keeps on prompting. I turned that journaling prompt into a list of 10 questions plus a bonus. Then I reduced the questions down to a shorter list of topics that I could share and ask people about. And I reached out to my podcast listeners, my Facebook groups, and friends and colleagues to get more thoughts and more ideas to share in today's co-created Q&A episode. I want to inspire you to ask yourself these questions or come up with additional or different questions that are more meaningful to you, and maybe even encourage you to connect with other people, to get their insights, and to get a different perspective. As I tell you about some of the shortened topics, I'm curious if you have any immediate reaction, like a spark of emotion or a little intuitive hit. Alignment, future self, what I want, what I don't want, resisting, how I feel, intuition, unconditional love, gratitude. If any of those topics popped out to you, send me an email at hi@bexby.org and let me know. But in the meantime, I will tell you what I think about these topics, as well as some of the input that I got from others. The first topic, alignment. What I mean by this, my personal explanation to myself, is when everything just clicks. It's when I feel physically and mentally and emotionally neutral, or maybe even good. And being in alignment means that I am open to and aware of my intuition. So if I usually have a morning ritual, for example, and I get the insight to switch it up or try something different, if it's aligning for me to do it, it is amazing. I get some unexpected surprise or a wonderful result. I was also so encouraged to discover that my immediate answer to the question, am I in alignment, when I first started doing the exercise was, oh no, I'm not. But as I released my resistance to doing the exercise and as I kept going, I felt myself open and get curious and get into alignment. So I think this is a perfect example of how you can get into alignment in an instant with a change of a thought or a memory or a change of scenery or a whiff of a scent. So then I have to wonder, well, is the opposite also true? Can I be in alignment and let myself slip out of it because of a thought or a memory or a bad smell? And of course, that is probably true. So this realization allows me to be on the lookout, to open my awareness for when that might happen so that I can decide to switch myself back into alignment. The next topic, future self. My concept of a future self is the person I am becoming, and I am becoming her intentionally, not because of marketing or societal expectations or what I always thought my path was, but through consideration and exploration and through thinking about who I want to become and why. I was talking about the concept of future self with a colleague of mine, and it was so interesting to hear her perspective. She described the possibility of fearing the reaction from your future self. What if you think your future self will judge you, your current self? What if she berates you for your current actions and your current decisions? Does the future you want the product the current you is producing? I have to admit, when I first heard that perspective and considered that someone may have this kind of fear, I was shocked. It sounded so foreign to me. But in the following days, I started to recognize this a little. Maybe not the same way that my colleague was describing it to me, but I started to notice that I sometimes use the threat of my future self's disappointment against myself. Wow, who knew? So I am grateful that we had the conversation that was a result of the question that came from the journal prompt. Again, the gift that just keeps on giving, the awareness that provides more and more awareness. The next question from that morning gave me the topic of what I want. I know what I want in the short term and maybe also the long term because of the character development work and the perfect day exercises that I have done for myself. I love to make to-do lists and to schedule things on my calendar so that I know what I want to do. And I am pretty decisive about knowing what I want to have as far as possessions and material things go. Do I struggle with knowing what I want? I know of a few podcast listeners who have let me know that they feel like they don't know what they want. And I can empathize with this not knowing. I've been there myself, and it made me feel so frustrated. And my suggestion for anyone who feels that way is to accept that you might not know exactly what you want right now. Well, don't make it worse by blaming yourself and resisting reality and telling yourself that you should know. If you find yourself in this situation, one experiment could be to practice choosing what you want in very small and mundane things, like what to order at the coffee shop or which soap to buy. Just get in the habit of asking yourself what you do want and allow yourself to listen for the answer and work your way up from decisions about soap to decisions about your life choices. I also suggest journaling, thought work, and maybe even working with a coach. There are so many different routes that you can take to learn how to figure out what you want. The flip side to that topic is the opposite question, what I don't want. I love the expression, contrast shows me what I don't want, so I know what I do want. But I don't frequently employ that recognition technique when I notice what I don't want. More often, I notice myself getting frustrated about seeing what I don't want, and then I don't usually take the extra step of translating that into, well, what does this mean? What do I want instead if I don't want this? So this question gave me the reminder to check in with myself when I'm noticing I don't want something. You might be wondering, well, is this the same as resistance? Let's talk about resistance. I got some great input and examples when I asked people about resistance. Hope said, I feel that I unconsciously resist healing for myself. What a powerful realization and acknowledgement. Hope, and everyone else listening to this, now that you know that you may resist healing, you can powerfully ask yourself, why? And explore that. On a similar note, Lisa brought up the question, what is the source of anxiety? And how can I overcome this to experience trust and peace, relaxation and calm? Don't you love the idea of instead of resisting the anxiety or resisting the healing, to open up to it? Another listener brought up that procrastination is along the lines of the topic of resistance, and this makes perfect sense. I definitely believe procrastination is a form of resistance. Do you see that in your own procrastination patterns? Another listener, who is now closer to fleshing out what her business will be, said, I find myself telling myself all kinds of lies about what the business, can and cannot be. I can't monetize it. It won't help people. I'm not an expert. People won't want it. Again, what powerful awareness to have as a result of asking that question, because each of those resistant thoughts are just sentences in her mind. And I love that she identified them as lies because she decides what is true for her. Of course she can monetize her business. Of course she can help people. Of course she is an expert. She decides how expert she is. She can choose to believe that people will want what she's offering. The next question that came up in the journaling exercise was how I feel. And you can do this right now while listening, even if you're hiking or driving. Just scan your body. How do you feel? Is there any discomfort anywhere? Any tightness? Are you holding your breath? Are your shoulders tense or hunched or relaxed? Is there any reaction, or has there been any reaction to anything we've talked about so far, like a tickle or a tingle or a fluttering when a certain topic or memory came up? Was there any tightness? Was there any release? I love asking my coaching clients to describe the physical sensations that accompany their emotions. I have one client who tells me that she feels some of her emotions in her chest and her gut. And I have another client who can feel her face and neck get hot. From my own experience, I notice when I start to feel angry or threatened, I feel it in my biceps, my upper arms. I have a friend who will point out mid-conversation when we wander into touchy topics, "Oh, I'm getting a strong reaction in my sternum." You can set a reminder on your phone to check in with your body at a certain time or times every day so that you drop into your body to notice how you are feeling physically and emotionally. Describe those feelings and sensations to yourself very specifically so that you're more able to recognize them and tune into them later. And speaking of tuning into, the next topic is intuition. Laurie told me, I have 2 friends who ask their bodies to give them a yes or a no about a question, and then they listen to their body, and the body actually gives them an answer. And the way that Laurie describes it, that almost sounds like an unbelievable skill. And I used to think so too. I used to be completely disconnected from my intuition. And I only figured out recently how to use it and trust it within the last 4 or 5 years. I credit a few things with learning this skill. Tarot was my gateway and my opening to my intuition. And learning about my inner voice from Jess and later Nicole really helped me recognize it and trust it. The 3 suggestions I have for you about your intuition are to notice it, to check in with it, and then to trust it. These suggestions will take practice and belief, and I do believe that this is a skill that can be learned. Unconditional love. This is an area that I am constantly working on. Going back to the question of what I want to practice unconditional love. And going back to the question of what I don't want to judge others and myself. Yet I still find myself frequently judging myself very harshly, and I wish I could be more unconditionally loving to myself. I guess this is the lesson for me to learn at this stage of my life. Sometimes I actually think it is so much easier for me to love others unconditionally, especially those who I don't know. It's easy for my brain to come up with reasons why they behave the way they do from a non-judgmental place. But this is not something that I do the majority of the time on myself. This also ties back to the surprise realization about the possibility of being judged by my future self. Even though we were hypothetically talking about someone else, the future version of me, I recognize there's still only one constant me, not 3 versions, past me, current me, and future me. The judgmental future thoughts are still coming from this one source, from my own brain. So this is a practice I continue to recognize opportunities to love others and myself unconditionally. And the final topic I want to talk about today is gratitude. I'm sure I must have heard about gratitude practices before, but the pivotal gratitude practice that really caught my attention was when I heard a presentation by Shawn Achor, who is the author of The Happiness Advantage. He gave some research-based reasons of why having a gratitude practice was so beneficial to us psychologically. And that is when I decided to create a gratitude practice for myself, but it was inconsistent and maybe at times unintentional. But lately, I've made gratitude much more of a daily and certainly a monthly practice. I wonder what other ways I can incorporate gratitude not only into my writing, but just into my noticing and my thinking, and even conversationally with people that I encounter. Wouldn't it make the world a better place? What did you think as you heard me talking about all of these topics? Would you ask yourself these questions that I came up with, or come up with additional or different questions and topics that are more meaningful to you? Could you imagine yourself starting a conversation with a friend or someone you love, or even a stranger about these topics or other topics in order to connect and to get their insight and to hear a different perspective? Before I go today, I just want to express my gratitude to you in the most heartfelt way. Thank you so much for giving this podcast a try, for sticking with me through my early episodes, and still now as I keep trying to figure this out. We just passed 10,000 downloads of the Release Your Resistant podcast in October of 2020. Thank you so much. This blows my mind. And even though reaching a specific download number was never a goal or a priority for me, I am really touched and excited and proud and humble all at the same time that some of you have listened to every single episode and shared them and re-listened to them. Thank you. I am starting to make plans for the 2021 season of this podcast, and I would love your input. You can share your feedback with me anonymously with an online survey, or on a voice-to-voice phone call where we can actually talk to each other and ask and answer questions. In exchange for your time and your thoughtful responses, I'll give you some of my time and my thoughtful responses. Let's spend an hour on the phone together, 30 minutes for me to interview you about this podcast, and 30 minutes for you to have coaching or brainstorming or tech tutoring with me. So go to the show notes for this episode at bexby.org/questions and scroll all the way down to the bottom to find the link for the online listener survey or the link to my calendar so you can schedule our interview. If you're on my email list, I have included those links in this week's email for you to find them easily. And if you are on my email list, that proves that you are one of my favorite people. And this week I have sent you the list of 10 questions that I created that I am currently using as journal prompts. And you can use them the same way or come up with your own questions and use them with friends or family or in a totally new way. If you're not on my email list, make sure to join at bexby.org/favorites, so you will always get a reminder of each new episode, plus you'll get the fun extras and offers that I send to all my favorite people. Have a great week. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so excited for the next 10,000 downloads, and I will talk to you next Friday. This has been Release Your Resistance. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, think about someone who you know who would love this episode and share it with them. There should be a share button on your app if you're listening to this on your phone. If you'd like to continue this conversation one-on-one or in real time, come visit me on my site at bexby.org to see how we can work together.